All right. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Got this new mic on my computer. Just doing a little check-in. I just wanted to get started on the projects I was planning to work on tonight. Um, I'm someone that in college did really well when I co-studied with people, and now that I work from home and I'm just in this office all day, it's definitely hard to focus. I'm also someone that prefers to work at night. So not many people are working at night, and so I figured this would be fun to do. And so, more specifically about what I'm doing, I'm actually giving a lecture in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, at the battlefield next month in a few weeks, the 163rd Battle of Gettysburg anniversary. And I want to do a presentation on the connections between Gettysburg and then my hometown here outside of DC. And so I'm pretty nervous about it because that's like a really big deal. It's probably like one of my largest audiences. So what I'm doing specifically is, of course, working on that presentation. And then more specifically, I'm actually looking at this very large volume of work called the Medical and Surgical Record of the Rebellion. And so after the Civil War, all of these surgeons who had like operated on people, on the soldiers, they all came together and just submitted their stories. So the volume, there's like three of them, they're categorized by like type of injury or type of operation or type of illness, because you got all these surgeons who are like, look what I was able to do. Or they're talking about newfangled things they tried, or like things they're not familiar with, or like new diseases or whatnot that pop up. So it's a really cool resource. And it is something that I have really enjoyed going through, but it is tedious. I can search by keyword, but it will not tell me where on the page the the text is. So I still have to read the whole page. So if I'm looking up Gettysburg, right, it'll tell me that there's one on the page, but it could be at the very bottom of it. So yeah, Grant's farm. Oh, very exciting. I have not been to any of Grant's cottages or homes. He has a couple of places he's lived. It's been something I've wanted to do. But I'm so Eastern Seaboard based. It's very rare for me to leave like my comfort zone of like the Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia kind of realm. I have traveled, but in terms of like distances that are not far enough to like fly, maybe, but just far enough to drive, it's very intimidating. But as many of you know, who you guys follow me on Instagram, which is where majority of you are coming from, we got the Little Rock, Arkansas trip booked, which is so exciting. I have no idea what to make of Arkansas. It was never on my radar before I started doing my research, but we gotta go. Oh, that's so cool. Oh yeah, that is kind of disgraceful, honestly. You're so close. What are you doing? You got to go and let me know how it is. Oh man. Yeah, so with these live streams, it's just meant to be very informal. If I was doing like real, like hardcore research, I would need to be in complete silence and have none of y'all chatting with me. But this is more of like a fun, let's just do some admin or whatever. So for me, looking through this text is not laborious, it's just tedious. They have to keep looking for these keywords. So, for example, I'm in volume 1, and volume 1 has 3 parts to it because they're not going to digitize a 900 page, book. Part 1 of volume 1 has 127 hits for Gettysburg, which isn't a lot when you think about it over the course of 100 or 200 pages, but times that by 9, it's going to be fun. So what we'll do is let's check in maybe like 15 minutes or so. That way those who come in later can still chat with us. So let's do 7:35, and I'll put that in the chat. Yes, I also Gettysburg is not far from me. It's about an hour and a half from DC, so it's not terrible to do. I find myself though, like when I do go up to Gettysburg, I don't do everything. I usually just go up for like one thing. I think if I had lived far enough away from it, Like if I'm someone that lives in the Midwest or West Coast and I come to like the Eastern Seaboard like every 5 years or 10 years, I would do like all of Gettysburg in one day. I would try my very best, but luckily, when I go up, I just go to like one museum or one part of the battlefield. I'm nowhere near an expert on Gettysburg. Like, don't get me wrong. I am a social historian. I love talking about how war affects the citizens and affects soldiers, but I'm not necessarily like a strategist. I'm not sure how to analyze like tactics and battle stuff. I leave that to those experts. So, but what I am doing is looking. I never actually really explained what the lecture was about. What a goof! But the thing is I'm talking more about the soldiers who were injured or got sick at Gettysburg and how they were transferred down to the DC area for treatment because DC was a big hospital hub, as well as any Confederate prisoners of war that were captured if they were sent down here. Um, and then vice versa, any Union who were captured, any prisoners who were captured by Confederates and then sent to DC for parole. But I got to get into that. I have all of like my notes are just not compiled into any cohesive manner. So that's what we're doing, and we're finding more about the case studies from this like massive volume, right? Yeah. So what I'll do is let's do put in the chat. So I also remember because I will not remember. Next chatty check-in, which sounds really funny. 7:35. I feel like I have to keep putting like the time zone because you never know with people. All right, guys. Good luck working, reading, knitting, whatever you're doing. All right. So we got our next little chatty check-in. So I'm still trudging through it. I decided actually to not use Gettysburg as a keyword, um, mainly because I was tired of reading about people who had been injured there and then were sent to like Philadelphia or somewhere I'm not researching. So I decided actually to go back to volume one. I didn't get very far, so it wasn't like a waste of time, but instead I'm actually working backwards. I want to see who was being treated in Alexandria and then seeing if they were injured at Gettysburg. I think that's probably better because across volume one, which has 3 parts, there were over 1,000 hits for Gettysburg itself. And then for Alexandria, it was like a third of that. So it just seems better. But it's hard because I want to like check both because you never know if somebody's like, because some of these entries list the name of the places these soldiers went, but not the city. But I know that, for example, that hospital was in Alexandria. So it's tough because as researchers, we want to thoroughly analyze everything and read everything. But there just comes a time when you just can't do that. You know, you're just going to need to like stop researching and just be satisfied with whatever information you have so far. This was actually the case in a project I did about 3 years ago when I worked at a museum. One of the tasks I took upon myself to do was to transcribe the ledger that. So the museum was a hospital during the Civil War, and I had transcribed all of the original records, which it took a long time. It took about maybe a year and a half to do that. There were 900 pages of very fine, very like squished together handwriting from the 1860s, and it's just like it just took a long time. And I was doing it by myself. I also had that was like a part-time gig, and I had a full-time job. I was teaching, so it just was a whole thing. But anyways, sometimes like when I was so I had transcribed it all, and then I went back and I wanted to research then every single soldier I had come across, which was doable because at the end of the day, I counted an even 1,700 soldiers, which is miraculous. It was an even number. And to research a soldier takes maybe a couple hours, to be honest, to do like in-depth research on a guy. Because honestly, if they have records, they have records. If they don't, they don't. There's not much we can really do about that. So that work, though, I was not satisfied with not finding information about a certain soldier. I wanted everybody in this medical ledger to have more than just a name and more than just like an admission date. I wanted them to have like something. So for this project that I took upon myself, I went outside of like the military service. I decided to look up more about their family. Like I wanted to know if they had been married, if they had children back home, like what their job was. You know, in some of these like muster rolls or enlistment records will put like someone's hair color, eye color, height, and things like that. So a lot of my work was never done, it seemed like. It seemed like if I really was going to fill in all of those categories for 1,700 soldiers, it would take a while. And then the second question I had to ask myself, aside from do I even have the bandwidth to do this, is what is this going to be? Because sure, there are going to be people who would love to know that Private John Smith had blue eyes and was 5'4" and was a farmer. You know, that'd be cool. But in reality, this was a very small hospital in one part of a very busy state during the war. It was not like I personally think the hospital was significant, but when you compare it to bigger ones that are actually near battlefields, etc., it wasn't really, you know, something people were going to be like, we need this. And those ledgers hadn't been transcribed for over 150 years, you know, by the time I got to it, 160 years. So I had to realize, you know, I may be interested in this, but like if I'm actually trying to produce it as a publishable work, I got to make sure people actually want to read it. So I could do that in my spare time as a hobby, weird hobby, but I had to stop and I had to say, okay, it's ready to go. We're gonna leave it as we don't know anything about this guy, or like I don't have any records for him, even though I did. They just weren't the records people really wanted to see or read about, which is unfortunate. And that's a big reason why I'm so happy now I have my own company, because I can publish whatever I want. However, it doesn't mean people will still want to read it. So when I chose my next book topic, right? So I had my first book coming out in October, which is very exciting. And oh yeah, your point is exactly correct. That's a big reason why I wanted to do the, like, more than just have them be a number in that ledger. That was very important to me. And unfortunately, I work very heavily with registers and ledgers and admissions and discharge and like everything to do with a hospital or a prison, right? Those are the two big things I study. And so it's hard to just kind of leave somebody as a patient number or even like a prisoner register number. I have been to Blindheim. It is really cool. It is very near where I live, actually. I've only been there once, though. I haven't been yeah, so it was a Union camp, and then it became a Confederate hospital. They have done a very great job at like, restoring. It's a weird word, but kind of like setting it up like a hospital. I remember they had two things going on in that museum. Number one, they had this like Bluetooth speaker that would play the sounds supposedly of a Civil War hospital scene. So there'd be like screaming, there'd be like footsteps, yelling, crying. It was very disturbing, but in an educational way. And then part two is that they also had this room spray, and you guys are probably gonna be like, what in the marketing tactic is this? But this museum had a room spray that made it smell like a hospital. So like, chloroform type smells, like chemically, food. Hopefully, I didn't smell it that day. I guess I just hadn't sprayed it, but they had it. And some people in my group had like put their noses up to it and were just disgusted. And I'm like, you know what? I appreciate it. I appreciate the effort to like have immersive history. But I could not imagine that. I think the noise machine is a great idea. Sometimes though, when you're in like houses that are that old, or you're in a museum that's that quiet, sometimes the quiet though is as impactful as fake noises. Now I will say I did steal from them that idea. I did take that idea of having a noise machine, because at that museum I worked at, we did a haunted house every year. And in 2023, I had the idea of making it a haunted Civil War hospital. Before we had done a haunted Victorian manor. The museum historically had set up for Halloween as like a funeral, because in that house's history, a lot of people had died in like the 1840s and 50s. So they wanted to set it up like a Victorian funeral, which is pretty cool. But when I came along, I entered the picture. I said to them, we need to do like a Civil War hospital theme. And I said, in our attic space, which is creepy, guys, I said, let's put a Bluetooth speaker with screaming and crying and whatever. And the thing is, I had made the audio track for it. I made it a lot more scary than the one at Blindheim. Blindheim was like ambient. It was like quiet. It was like the coughing was like every 5 minutes. It was not like you're being bombarded. But for this haunted house, I was like, we're gonna bombard them. Yeah, the writing on the walls. I'm always flabbergasted when I go to a historic site and there is writing on the walls and it's still there. Like, just picture for a second, you guys, like you're buying a home and then, you're starting to paint it and you're putting your furniture in and you want to update some things about it. And you see that there's this writing, like, and it's not even old. It's maybe 10 years old or 5 years old, and it's like chicken scratch, or it's like John was here. It's like, who's going to keep that, right? Just paint right over it. So the fact that there is like graffiti that is preserved, and thankfully a lot of that graffiti that is preserved in places, usually it's hidden or it's behind something. But good on a lot of people in the Victorian period to be like, I think this will be special one day. I think someone's going to want to see this. No, I love that. I'm trying to think. There was another. I think I'm wrong. I'm probably wrong, but there was it's called the Graffiti House. I think it's at Bristow Station or Brandy Station. I think it's Brandy Station, the battlefield in Virginia. But it's essentially what you think it is. Just there was just writing all over the place. And then at in the Shenandoah, Winchester, Virginia, in the courthouse where they had kept prisoners during the war. There's also some writing. Again, that's preserved. And you'd think these are Union prisoners in Confederate territory who are scratching on the walls. And then when it becomes a courthouse again in the South, you think they'd want to like cover it up. So I just find it to be really fascinating. It's cool stuff. I think, like, you know how some people say there are way too many books for me to read? Like, I have way too many, like, books on my TBR list. I have way too many historic sites that I want to get to the point where, like, it makes me panic. Like, I get, there are people who panic that they can't read, like, XYZ books in their lifetime. I can't, I'm panic. I panic when I think I'm not going to be able to get to this museum or see this cool place. That makes me sad. I hope when I'm a ghost, I'm going to be able to like float around and visit everything in the afterlife because I think that will make me feel better. Yeah, I think it's Brandy Station. I like in that region, all those battles they kind of blend a little bit for me, to be honest. And again, I said earlier, I'm not a military historian, so I don't get any dates wrong for laws or like the rise and fall of nations, but I do get things wrong when it comes to these like battles that happen back to back to back. Um, yeah, Winchester's pretty cool. Fun fact about Winchester, it changed hands. I think they said like 25 times. Like it during the war, it was tossed back and forth between the Union and Confederacy like 25 different times. So I think that's pretty interesting. We'll do another little work session and then let's have our next chatty session. Let's see here, chatty check-in. Um, um, let's see. Let's do 8:10 Eastern. I know, right? That'd be so cool if we could do that. All right, guys, let's go back to work about 20-ish minutes. We'll come back and talk about some other cool stuff. All right, I'm coming on the mic a little early, just in case the thunderstorms get a little worse. I just heard like 6 different things at once. First of all, oh, nice. Yeah, good seeing you, Katie. Hope to see you next time. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining. So I heard 6 things at once. I heard thunder. I heard just a wind, the wind howling, and then I heard what sounded like a trash can or something like tumble and like just be like thrown about, or maybe someone's like deck chair. And then of course the trees, the blinds are closed, but I can kind of see them like swaying. No rain yet though, but it's got really dark. And anyone else who's on the eastern seaboard of the U.S. knows we're supposed to have some pretty bad storms tonight. But DC usually we miss it a lot. It passes right over us. But it seems like tonight it may actually happen. So we'll have to see. I'm keeping the ear peeled out for how it is, but it's definitely a real summer storm happening. That's for sure. Oh, here's the rain. Ah, so it's fine because I'm someone that really likes to like read during a storm or read when it's raining. But I can't like do other work. Like I can't do any writing or like in-depth primary source analysis. It's too distracting. Um, so I can read, like I'll read a book and that's okay. But if I'm trying to like actually create my own thoughts, it's just not gonna happen. I think I get too cozy and too soothed by it, right? Oh man. Yeah, that wind is very strong right now. I think like for me, I like the idea of a thunderstorm. But I think when it gets too windy and the potential for trees to fall over, that's when I'm like, mm-mm. And now it's not just a calm little thunderstorm. Hope you guys are having a good night so far. So I decided to put us because of the storms were like picking up in this next session. I had decided to put aside my Gettysburg research because it just wasn't happening because there's so many little kids outside. You might be able to hear them. They're like, oh my gosh, and they're shrieking because they've been playing outside, and all of a sudden it's like storming. So I put that aside, and I was working on some content calendar stuff for a little bit. And kind of like what I envisioned for my book writing series. It's funny because when I designed my playlist I have where I make content about writing my nonfiction book, I don't really have stages of my book really planned yet. I don't have the materials. I don't have all the archives and primary sources yet. So essentially, I'm trying to get a lot of like the pre-planning stuff done, and then I can't do any writing on it really until I get the primary source material, and I won't really get that material until September, or at least I won't start to get that material until September. So July and August may be a little sparse with it, but I am planning for next week or maybe the week after to do like a personal curriculum for the book because I need to learn a lot more about medical knowledge. I'm writing a biography on a surgeon, so I need to know a lot more about like kind of the world he was operating in. That is a pun, very much intended, by the way. I'm trying to learn more about like the kind of technology he had available to him. I'm not going to be able to understand what he was doing. That's just facts. But I need to kind of know what was available to him. I do know what he studied. Like he was a professor of anatomy. So like, what does teaching anatomy look like in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s? He was the superintendent of an insane asylum for a little while. What does that job look like? So it's stuff I can still look up without knowing exactly what his day-to-day was like, right? So that's the kind of stuff I'm hoping to do in the next couple of videos for the book writing series. The wind is getting like really strong, you guys, and I fear I might lose power because it's very common for my townhouse complex to lose power, and so I don't want the live stream to cut off on you guys, and you're like, what on earth? What happened? So unfortunately, I will have to cut the live stream a little shorter than I intended. I plan to go till 9 p.m. tonight, but I just have this really weird feeling about it, based on how the wind is and how dark it is. So at this point, though, I will say to you guys, have a very good night. I love the conversations we've been having. And I will have on my link tree in my Instagram stuff the date for the next live stream. I will be traveling to Richmond next weekend for a conference. So follow me on Instagram, of course, so that you guys can check that out. But then I'll know for sure the next evening I'll have free. And I don't plan on doing these like every night, right? That's a lot. But the once a week, every 2 weeks, we'll have a night together where we can just chat about life and research. So I will bid you adieu for this evening. I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. And thanks for tuning in. Bye.